Okay, so let's get started. So again, thank you for joining me today on the webinar for August, which is on protecting your data. So I'd just like to welcome you to the session. For those of you who haven't joined us before, this is a monthly webinar we do on a varying topic each month. It's generally the last Wednesday of each month that we do each session. And as I say, the topics change from month to month. If there is a topic that you're generally interested in or that you would like to see featured, please do respond back to the email that you would have gotten the registration confirmation from, and I will get copies of those requests. And we'll hopefully, if we get a couple of topics that are quite popular, we will go and look at delivering a couple of those sessions in the future. So today's agenda will be just a quick introduction of myself and the session, and then we're going to look at some common threats that can, I suppose, affect you and your data and your computer. We'll look at what things should we be avoiding or what things should we be aware of, some security measures to try, and then we'll close with a bit of a Q&A session, and I'll also go through just a quick walkthrough of some of the things I would have talked about throughout the session, just to show you in real time what those look like. So the quick introduction, my own name is Niall for those of you who haven't joined before. I am the technical trainer within Mozy's support team. I do these monthly webinars, but as well as that, I look after the technical training of all of our internal technical support agents. And I also do some training with our customers as well. So as I say, today we'll be looking at protecting your data. What are the threats, what you should be avoiding or looking out for and being aware of? What can you do to try and increase your protection? While this is a session on protecting your data, we're not going to be able to cover absolutely everything. So therefore, this session is just going to cover some small areas, some small, easy to, I suppose, respond to sections of securing your data that you yourself can do, be it in a small business environment or on your home machine. Okay, so we're not going to look at the absolutely everything, but we're going to try and hit some of the key points and give you some key pointers in terms of protecting your data. Okay, so in terms of threats, we're looking at a couple of different areas. So traditional threats are ones that we often forget about, and they can sometimes be overlooked by us because we, I suppose, in the back of our mind, we don't think of them happening ever to us. But common areas where you can lose your data outside of any threats from viruses and that is basic things like theft and accidental loss or damage of your data. We often overlook these in the kind of, I suppose, high-tech environment we are now. We can sometimes forget about these things. But these are common areas that we see in customers coming to report when they're coming looking to restore data from Mozy, is that sometimes they've had scenarios where they have accidentally lost their laptop. You know, we've had stories of people accidentally putting the bag down somewhere and getting it in a taxi or getting in a cab, or leaving it in the back seat of a car and the car gets broken into and it gets stolen, or small things like accidentally spilling a drink on top of your laptop. These things do happen, and sometimes because it's a traditional threat, we sometimes overlook it, and we don't think about that as being a potential area that can threaten our data. Another area that sometimes we may not think about, but is also a key one in terms of data loss, is hardware issues. Okay, hardware corruption or failures do happen. Okay, so hard disk drives, they do have a certain lifespan. It's, I suppose, the famous quote that goes around is, there's two things guaranteed in life, and that's debt and taxes. Well, a third I would add to that is the fact that a hard disk drive will die at some stage. The hard disk drive you see in the image on the screen at the moment is a traditional hard disk drive where it's just recording onto the disk like that. You will get a lot of people now getting solid state drives, but those two as well only have a certain lifespan. There is only so many writes that can be made and so many reads that can be made off that before they will eventually die. Now, obviously, a solid state drive will last a lot longer than a traditional hard drive, but it can be corrupted as well. So, reasonings like, why, I suppose, for any of you who are business users, this hard drive failures is the reason why we go through, companies will go through PC refreshes every couple of years, or they may go through some hardware refreshes. They may change out the hard drives every number of years because of this scenario. Okay, and if we fail to take this into account, that hardware can fail on us, we may not be protecting ourselves proficiently against any kind of issues that may arise. Okay, so just be aware that not only outside of the external threats, the internal threats to yourself that are ones that we can keep an eye on are things like hardware issues on our machines, or the traditional threats of theft or accidental loss or damage. These are ones that we can look to ourselves to protect. Maybe obviously not so much the theft, but we can work around areas where we can protect that data by not making it as easy to be stolen. But also being attentive to the fact that we have to keep an eye as well on the health of our machine. Okay, so obviously those kind of areas are the kind of traditional threats, and the hardware threats are stuff that we can definitely, I suppose, be responsible for ourselves in just being attentive and being alert to certain particular areas. The other thing that we're looking at here in terms of threats is the cyber threats. So these are the ones that people are most probably common with. These are the ones that people most focus on when we talk about protecting our data. Sometimes people will think about these before they think about the hardware or the traditional threats that may be there as well. Because obviously cyber threats are attributed to outside attacks on us, and that's probably why our attention is so focused on those, because it's an external threat. So they're the things that we're used to talking about, the traditional threats like cyber theft and cyber attacks. They look to disrupt and slow down, say, if you're from a business point of view, they look to disrupt and slow down a business's ability to do their business. But also for a personal user, it looks to slow down and disrupt their use of their own personal computer and their own personal systems. So these sort of attacks are, these are the reasons that people invest in authentication, threat protection, and encryption software. So these traditional cyber threat attacks, and that's the things we're talking about there, is these things that look to disrupt and slow down your networks, is what traditional kind of antiviruses and threat protection software look out for. It's the person trying to do the denial of service attack, or they're trying to push some other virus onto your machine. So these were the traditional type of threats where people were just I suppose they were attacks for the sake of being attacks. Oftentimes there was no purpose to them. There was no benefit to the person who was appropriating the attack. There was no gain to them for appropriating the attack, especially maybe so for business users. Maybe they shut down a business for a number of hours, or they were able to affect the business on its day-to-day runnings. But from a personal perspective, from the individual, sometimes these viruses were just viruses for the sake of viruses. It was nonsensical. They were just done just to prove a point that they could be done sometimes. What we're seeing now is emerging cyber threats. It's where before it might have just been a hacker, and doing this stuff just for the sake of doing it, just because they had the ability to do it, which in itself doesn't make much sense why somebody would do that, but that's obviously the world we live in. Now we're moving towards more cyber criminals, they're changing their game plans. The emerging threats that we're seeing today are cyber destruction and cyber extortion and blackmail. So you may have heard of scenarios like this and stories like this in the press over the last number of months and years, but this is what's happening now, is rather than rather than just being interested in disrupting a business, or disrupting a person from using their own personal machines, it's attacking businesses, and it's attacking individual users by going after their assets, which is their machines and their data. Okay, and that valuable asset, and most important of all, obviously, as we're talking about here, is our data, because that is what is the real priceless part of our computers. You may be sitting in front of a Lenovo, a Dell machine, a MacBook Air, and these all do cost money, but the hardware that's in those machines is easily replaceable, from a physical perspective. Obviously, financially, it's a bit tougher, but from a physical perspective, you can replace the laptop that's in front of you. The real valuable thing on that laptop or desktop in front of you is the data that resides on it. For you home users, personal users, that can be images. It can be family pictures. It can be family accounts. For business users, it can be your accounting information for how you run your business. It can be your invoicing, all that kind of important stuff to you. That's the important stuff that's on your machine, and it's this kind of data that the emerging cyber threats are looking to exploit. So they're looking to steal that proprietary data. They're looking to either destroy on-site networks. They're looking to destroy any kind of on-site backups, and they're looking to cripple your network and your hardware environment. And then what's been coming, and you'll definitely have heard, probably most likely, of this in the press in the last number of months, is they're looking to hold data ransom. So it's bringing about this new buzzword right now, which is ransomware, which is software that comes onto your machine, or malware rather, that it's downloaded onto your machine, and it'll pop up a warning telling you, you can't access your data unless you pay this fine. Or, it might come up with a fake looking FBI certificate saying that you've accessed illegal data, and that you can't access your machine until you do the following steps and pay this ransom to a certain address. And these are the kind of attacks that we're starting to see now in terms of emerging cyber threats. And it's this ransomware that is becoming quite dangerous to our end users in terms of protecting their data. So I'm sure if I probably asked for if we were sitting in a traditional classroom environment for a hands up, how many people have heard of ransomware, I would say most of you may have. Some of you may have heard of it from a different point of view, may have heard of malware or something along those lines, or you may just have heard the stories about scenarios where people are getting these kind of pop-ups telling them that they need to pay to release their data, and may not have had a name for it. So basically, as I say, malware, ransomware is a malware that infects the computer and restricts the user's access to their files, or threatens the permanent destruction of their information unless the ransom is paid. So it's pretty serious, as you can imagine. So last year alone, for ransomware alone, according to the FBI, there was over 2,400 complaints received about ransomware and malware. And for that, for individuals and small businesses, about $24 million was paid out by ordinary people in 2015. So that's quite a lot of money. And from a business perspective, this is not just happening to individual users and to small to medium-sized businesses, but it's also happening to larger companies. I think the one a lot of people may have heard about is the hospital out in Hollywood who was caught for ransomware, and their patient files were held to ransom. Okay, and they're saying, according to industry analysis, last year alone, for companies who were subjected to cybercrime, so not just ransomware but all types of cybercrime, the average payout per data breach was $6.5 million. So it's costing a lot of money, these types of threats. Okay, so obviously, these are serious threats in terms of the emerging cyber threats. And traditional things like antivirus software and threat prevention are of massive benefit. But you also have gone one step in advance as well by protecting your data on the cloud. So that's why it's important to make sure that you keep an eye on and you are selecting the correct files for backup when you're running your backups with Mozy, because Mozy has what's known as a non-executable environment online, and that basically means that if you were to get one of these ransomware packages and it was actually being installed on your machine, then it can sometimes encrypt the data that's on your hard drive so that you can't access that data. With Mozy, what you can do is, obviously, if you have the ability to do it yourself, you will roll back to a previous version or you will install a new version of the operating system on the machine, and you can just download from a previous date before the actual software or virus malware was installed on the machine and recover your data. So backing up offline is a massive, obviously, advantage that you're already having in terms of protecting your data from these types of threats. So what other things can we be aware of? So what I'm looking at here is other aspects of things that we should be aware of in terms of what can actually what can cause damage to my data on my machine, be it a PC or a desktop machine, a Mac, be it your laptop. Obviously, being aware of the physical computer. When we were talking about traditional threats like theft, accidental loss, accidental damage, where the computer actually is stored is important in itself. If you're working with your laptop, ensuring that it's in a secure place overnight, or if you're leaving it in the office environment, if it's a business environment, making sure you have a lock on it. That most companies most computer stores these days will sell you a lock that can lock the laptop directly to the table, and things like this to keep your actual physical hardware secure. Another thing outside of theft or accidental loss, another thing to be careful of is actually the age of the machine that you're using. Okay, so if you're using a particularly old machine, and I'm talking something that's maybe 3 or 4 years old. At that point, because your hard drive will have been doing so many writes all along, if you're particularly, even if you were a medium, I would say a conservative user of your machine, there would be a significant amount of read and writes being going on in that hard drive. And it's just to be aware of the hardware that's on your machine. So if you're a Windows user, maybe you're just checking from time to time if you're getting any errors, checking your system or application log files to check and see what if any issues are being reported. And just to be conscious of the fact that, if you are running an older machine, then your daily backups it's more important to be running those daily backups, because that hard drive or whatnot may at some point in the near future have issues. So it's worthwhile actually keeping an eye on that. If you have a computer that's about 3 to 4 years or older, just keeping an eye on the physical aspects of the machine. Weak passwords is another area to be aware of when you're talking about protecting your data. It may not seem so obvious. You may say, well, what difference does that make to the files and folders that are on my machine? But if you're using weaker passwords across the board, be it to log into your laptop or your desktop, or you're using weak passwords to log into accounts online, things like that, then these can be gateways into your machine for anybody who is trying to get access to your machine for the wrong reasons. And the kind of things I'm talking about are the passwords that you see on screen. And some of you may shake your heads and think, who would ever use those? But according to a 2015 study of college from a college perspective, and the Boston College, they were seeing 60% of users were still using one of these three passwords. So that's pretty scary that people to this day and age are using these kind of passwords to access kind of important accounts online. And not only just accounts online, but also to access their desktop machines and laptops. So because these weak passwords can be access points for anybody who is looking to actually harm your machine and your data. Another big one is phishing emails. Okay, so these may be obvious to most people, they may not be so obvious to others, but because phishing emails are becoming so more sophisticated, some of them, a lot of people may remember the older 419 scammers, these kind of stories of people saying, I've just I'm writing you from somewhere, and I have $20 million for you. All I need you to do is to transfer me $500 through Western Union. These kind of phishing emails were the old school type of emails that were going out, and they required you to respond back with some information. But now what we're seeing is that in the first quarter of 2016, 93% of all phishing emails contained encryption ransomware. So a lot of the bulk majority of emails going out there, phishing emails, a lot of them now are also including ransomware. So that when you click that link, no longer is it just taking you to a fake website for you to enter in your details. Once you click that link, it's downloading a software to start the encryption process and the malware process on your machine. So things to check when you receive any emails. A lot of you may, if you're using something like a web-based email account, will have spam filters and stuff set up. But basic things that you can do to protect yourself are, do you know the sender? If you don't know the sender, then obviously, be tentative around anything that's being asked of you within that email. If you don't know the sender, and are within the body of that email, are you being asked to click on a link or download anything from the email? If you are, that should be setting up red flags for you. Okay. And also what you can do as well is, if it's coming to you and it looks like an official email from, say, a government source or a local authority or, your bank, check the sender's email address. It's always a good one to have a quick check off of, because sometimes they can make the email itself look pretty official, but the email address that it's being sent from may not be totally official. If it's something from a bank or again from a government body and you're unsure of it, the best thing you can do is not to reply to that email directly, but get on the phone, go to that company's website, get a contact number and contact them. See if they've actually sent you an email. And as a lot of banks will warn you anyway, they will never send you any emails looking for you to enter any details online. Okay, are you downloading? Another one that we get is one to be aware of in terms of protecting the data on your machine is being aware of the software that you're downloading from the internet. Okay, so when you're on the website and you're looking to download the software, checking, do you trust the site? Do you know the site? Are you familiar with the site? Is it an official site? Making sure that any of the softwares that you may be downloading from the internet are coming from the actual company's website. For example, if you were to download Firefox, you wouldn't go to a third-party website to download that. You'd go directly to Mozilla's website themselves and download it from there, because that's their direct site. That's the official download package. Whereas from a third-party site, somebody else could be after injecting something else into that as well. So as you're downloading your Firefox, it could be also downloading in the background without you knowing some sort of a malware. So just be careful when downloading software from the internet. That you know it's from a reputable site, and B, just making sure that the site itself is official and that you can trust the site. Okay, and this goes for a lot of other, a lot of, because nowadays we do tend to download a lot of softwares from the internet, be it text file editors or compression software, all these kind of different things that we would download now, rather than what we used to do before, stick in a floppy disk or stick a CD into the hard drive or into the machine and actually download or install the software from there. Other ways to be aware, I suppose, in terms of protecting your data, is use of public Wi-Fi's. Okay, so now for me, for everybody on here, maybe not everybody, but the majority of people, when we're out and about, we're always we're connected either through mobile internet or we're connected through public Wi-Fi's. We're connecting to free Wi-Fi spots to get our access to Wi-Fi. A lot of people would have connected to something like Starbucks and so forth. So people would have access to these previously, or they still do, in terms of public Wi-Fi's. What I would say is that, if you are using public Wi-Fi's, just limit your transactions. Just be aware of what you're actually doing on the public Wi-Fi. If you're only accessing it to go and, go on your Facebook or go on your Twitter, maybe that's okay. What I would say is don't be doing any kind of logins to any important sites like online banking or paying a bill or anything like that, where it's a secure website. You don't want, you wouldn't want to be giving your login details to anybody. Just think about it. If you're doing anything on a public Wi-Fi, say you go to Starbucks and you log into the public Wi-Fi, if you're trying to think of what should I be able to log into and what should I be able to do on my laptop while I'm on this network, I would think of it as the way is that if there was a stranger sitting next to you and they were watching everything you logged into, then what would you not log into? That's what you should be thinking, because a lot of the times in public Wi-Fi's and things like that, hackers and people can use different types of software to monitor connections, and they can use those public Wi-Fi's to actually access your machine. So they can access your machine and then they can monitor what you're logging in and out of, and they could potentially get access to your your information, and which in turn then can down the line put actual danger to the data that you have, not only on your laptop or desktop, but also the important data that you have in the cloud, be it on online banking or online billing or anything like that you may have for different products. Other things to be aware of, social media, because we all use it now, and there is a lot of I suppose access to it now, and there's a lot of people are on it. Things to be careful of in terms of social media is things like clickbait websites. Where you're being asked to click in. You see a sensational article and you click on it to open up to read the article, and it's then asking you to give access to this, and this, or it's not displaying the page properly. Just be careful those kind of clickbait websites. I don't mean something from CNN that has a bit of a sensational title and you look into it because you know that website. But I'm talking about the kind of clickbait articles that you see sometimes in social media, like Facebook and on sometimes on Twitter, and you can see that the article, there's an image there, there's a small bit of the heading, and then there's a kind of a shortened URL, which is basically the website address. It's shortened, you don't know where it's directing to, and I would just generally avoid those, because if you click on one of those, sometimes it may start asking you to it might ask you to enter certain details or information. At that point, if you're clicking into anything and it's asking you for details and information and you're unsure of the website and you don't know it, I would close out of it and come back. And especially from things like Facebook, I wouldn't be giving third-party applications access to your account unless you know them pretty well. or the application that you're clicking into. If it was something like TripAdvisor, fair enough, because the website is just for reviews and things like that. It's pretty trusted. But if it was a third-party application that you hadn't heard of, and you may have just clicked on it because you saw it in your news feed, these kind of things can put threats down the line as well to your data. And I'm not just talking about again just the data on your machine, but also the data that is your private information. And these are the kind of things as well that we don't think about sometimes. People can recreate profiles, and people may have seen the show on MTV that was pretty successful, and the movie that came before it, and Catfish. That's the other side of things that people can use in terms of protecting your personal data, which is important. And that's why as well down their privacy settings are quite important. Making sure that who can see your data online is very important. It's always worthwhile in certain social media platforms to make sure you go in and you check checking your security settings about who can see your posts, who can see your images, and things like that. Especially from the threats that we had in terms of traditional threats earlier in the presentation, we talked about theft. Social media is a great way that you could be setting yourself up for a theft and not knowing it. People tend to post about how they're heading to the airport and they're going away on vacation. If the wrong people see that and have access to your information because you haven't looked at your settings, then there is a good chance that they could be picking up on relevant information to your actual house being vacated, so that there's a chance that a theft could then take place. So there was a quick question came in there a second ago, and it's a pretty good one, so if you just bear with me. Yeah, so there's a great question there from Shari in terms of the secure site indicator on a website. That is still there on the majority of websites, and I will show you how to check that in a moment. I will come back to that because that's a very important point. And it's always one to be aware of and to keep an eye on. So they're the things to kind of be aware of, and they're also, as we were going through that, we were talking about, I suppose, things that we could do as well to prepare ourselves and things to try to, in order to secure data as well. But some specific ones to try, things like stronger passwords. Okay, don't reuse or share passwords. If you're using a password for one website, try not to reuse it on another website, because if it's broken once, it's now being able to be used on multiple areas. So yes, this can cause a bit of an issue sometimes, because people will, we have a lot to remember between PIN numbers for bank accounts, social security numbers, alarms for our houses, those kind of numbers. So we all have all these kind of passwords and numbers going on all the time. Things that you can try in terms of stronger passwords is create a sentence. So I've created a sentence here. I deliver a support webinar once a month. From that, then, taking the first letter of each word, I've created a password to the right. So you see it's 1, uppercase D, ASW, the number 0, A, uppercase M. So now I have a secure password created from a sentence that really doesn't really mean very much to anybody else, but to me. So these are the kind of things you can use to create stronger passwords. They're small ideas, but they're very useful. This particular technique is one that I use myself all the time in terms of creating passwords, because for us here within Mozy EMC, we're every 60 days, you have one account that you have, the password has to be changed. It could be 10 days later, another account, the password is expiring. So you will have plenty of accounts that you may use online where the password expires every certain amount of days. So it's led to me having to create passwords on a regular basis. And to be able to remember them, I've started using this kind of a technique whereby you're creating a sentence. So you have to remember the sentence to remember a complicated password. Okay, because if you took away the sentence and you just had that password at the end, you're not probably going to remember that in your head very easily. So stronger passwords are very important, and not reusing them or sharing them with anybody. If you do share a password with somebody, and you, for whatever reason it may be, you need somebody maybe to log into an account for you, be sure to change it at the earliest convenience for yourself after that person has used it, because you don't want anybody having access to your accounts. The health of your computer, as we mentioned a while ago, is very important. If there's any hardware issues being reported, checking on those. If you are seeing any slowness with your machine, and if you are using an older machine, it is worthwhile getting it checked. You can do that yourself by checking the system and application log files within a Windows machine and the system files within a Mac machine. And the steps to do those, what I'll do is I'll include them in the notes so that you have those. I'll try and find knowledge base articles on the Microsoft website for the Windows stuff, and I'll try and find a knowledge base article on the Mac or the Apple website for the Mac ones, so that you can have a look and check on the hardware and stuff like that on your machine, just to make sure that everything is ticking okay. Other things that you can use to protect your machine in terms of the health of your computer, obviously antivirus software or threat detection software. They are very useful. They can help you in terms of identifying any threats that may be coming into your network or your environment, and they are quite useful as an additional protection to your Mozy offsite backup. Okay. The last two things I want to talk about in terms of things to try in terms of protecting your own data is making sure what you're backing up. Making sure that you are backing up everything that you need to be backed up. Thinking about, rather than just selecting big sets of files and stuff like that, just making sure you take the time to think about your file selection and making sure that you have all your data selected. When you go through the initial Mozy setup, you may have selected a number of things, and you may not have gone back to it for a while. You may not have gone back to check, it has that new presentation you created been selected for backup, or was that in an area that I had selected for backup? I'd go back in, have a quick look, not every day. I'm talking maybe every couple of weeks, just going back in just to check, have a quick look. Wouldn't take you more than 30 seconds. To have a quick look at what's actually selected for backup, and making sure that you're happy with your file selection in terms of what's being backed up. And one other thing that I think is quite useful is actually doing a restore. Try and run a restore. It can be useful. It can be of benefit so that you can see how the process works, and that you're not in a scenario where you're coming at that for the first time when you're in a time of high stress. If you've potentially lost a file or something's been deleted accidentally, or the file might have the latest version of the file might be corrupted. At least if you've done a trial run of a restore once, when you're not really in a scenario where you need it to be done, you're not as stressed, you're a bit more relaxed, and you can actually walk through the process and see how it works. And it can give you that peace of mind as well, that you've done this previously ahead of a scenario where and I would touch wood that you wouldn't have a scenario where you would need to use it for real, but it's nice to be prepared as well. Okay, so that's it from in terms of a presentation point of view. I will take questions while you're just putting those questions into the question box there that you will have on your screen. I'm just going to go show you one or two quick things that we kind of talked about while we were going through the presentation. And I'm going to go to and show Shari's question around the secure site indicator. I'm going to show that too. So we're just going to, if you just bear with me here. Okay, so you'll see, so for the first thing I want to look at here is in terms of the emails you may be getting. Okay, so sometimes something like, say, if you're using Gmail, it will have a spam folder already for you, and it will have filters there already. What you can do then as well is report spam yourself. So if you're getting stuff into your primary email inbox, be sure to report it. You will have it when you open up an email like this. You will have a scenario where you can report spam. In nearly all, be it Outlook, be it Thunderbird, be it Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, any of those will all have a feature to be able to report the spam. It's useful to do that because what that does is that these email companies will look at those files that are being reported for spam, and they'll check for similarities in any emails that are coming through to you in the future. So if you look at something like, say, that's in spam here, in my spam folder here, in this test email account that I have, and this actually is an email account that I use just for any signups that I need to do to any softwares I'm using, or if I'm having to sign up to something online for for work, or be it in my personal life, I tend to use a secondary email address, and it just avoids me getting a lot of spam as well to my primary email address that I prefer to use just for communication between friends, family, and for business. So here, let's say if we look at this here, this is actually a legitimate. This could be very much a legitimate email address or email. Sorry, from it's just a sports store here in Ireland. So if I look at it here, why is this? It's similar to. So again, it's telling me why this is. If I want to learn more, I can learn more. What I can do as well is I can check here the email address it's coming from. Okay, so I would imagine that it's telling me that this is spam because it's coming from this mail address here. So this is the actual official email address, but they may be using some sort of a marketing program, and that's sending it out through this kind of marketing mail email address, and that's why it's flagged it. Okay, so it's saying that this doesn't look right to it, and that's probably why it's marked it as spam. Okay, so they're the kind of things to check on. Always check who the email is from, and sometimes it can give you a good idea as to why it's being flagged. If you're unsure, they should be the kind of things you should be checking. Who's it coming from? Do I know the sender? And in the body, is the body asking me to download anything, or is it asking me to click a link? You may think, oh, it's only just a link and I click on it. But once you click that link, sometimes it may be taking you to another website, and it may be asking you to input information in the more traditional cyber threat attacks. But in the more, the newer type of cyber threat attacks that we're seeing, the ransomware kind of stuff that I talked about earlier, that link could be going directly to begin a download. So that's what you don't want to do. So that's why I would say, if you don't know who the sender is, and the body then is telling you to click on a link or to download an attachment, I would avoid it. Even if it's something like it's saying, oh, the invoice attached is your invoice for your recent purchase. I would ignore it. If you don't recognize the company, and even if you do recognize the company and you haven't made any purchase with them recently, or if it's a company that you recognize and you have made a purchase from them, recently enough, check the who it's from address. If you have any sense of I'm not sure, then what I would do is always reach out to that company directly yourself and ask them, have they sent you an invoice? It happened to me recently with an external training provider. They sent me an email with an invoice, and the from address didn't make sense to me, so I reached back out to them directly, and they said to me, yeah, that came directly from a pre-programmed billing system that they have, and they're the kind of from addresses that it produces. But at least I was able to coordinate that with somebody that I knew and I had spoken to previously. So it's worthwhile checking those, and it's better, as the old saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. The one that Shari mentioned a moment ago around the secure sites, for something like Google Chrome, you can see it up here. It'll tell you here your connection. If you just click on the lock up here, your connection to the site is private. If you look at something again like my webinars dashboard here, again your connection to the site is private. Something then though like Google Mail, okay, so it's telling me here this site uses a weak security configuration, so your connection may not be private. Okay, so even though I'm on an email account, it's telling me that there is a chance that my connection may not be 100% private. So again, in that scenario, I would just act with a degree of caution. Okay, so it was a good point that Sherry brought up there. That is a good way as well to check. And something especially like online banking, you should, or if anything where you're entering your credit card details or your debit card details, would always be looking for this connection up here. Or at the very least that you would have a HTTPS connection here. Okay, that just means secure connection, and it's an encrypted connection, and that just means that your data is secure going across that connection. Would always look for those, especially from banking or anything where you're paying something online. That's what you should be looking for, is to make sure that your connection to the site is private, secure, and it's a HTTPS connection. I cannot think off the top of my head of any website where I've ever paid for anything that hasn't had that security or that HTTPS on it. Well, anything that I would be willing to pay on. If it doesn't have it on there, I'm not going to enter my credit card or debit card details because it can be intercepted. In terms of downloading software from the internet, as I mentioned a while ago, let's say for something like 7-Zip. 7-Zip would be a compression software, like you'd have WinZip on your machine or on your Windows machine, or you might, if you have a Mac machine, when you right click, you can send to compress the file and create a zip file. 7-Zip is just a different type of compression file, but it would be common enough, probably to a lot of people who do tech support or in small businesses. It's kind of it's a free to download compression software. And so what I wanted to show basically here was the fact that look, you have the software. You know what the software is called. You search for the software. It's called 7-Zip. Here is the official 7-Zip website. If I scroll down here are two different websites that are offering the download of that file. Okay. Now, I personally am not a user of, say, SourceForge, but I have heard of CNET before, and I've been on that website before, and I know it's a relatively well-known download site for softwares. But if I'm going to be downloading this software, I'm going to go directly to the source. Even if it's a semi-reputable website like that, and again, I don't know enough about CNET to say that I couldn't credibly say that it's 100% secure, but it could very well be. But the thing about it is that I know that this is the official download website. The same reason that if you were going to download the Mozy software, you download it from the Mozy website. You wouldn't go to a third-party website to download it. It wouldn't make sense to. Why would you go to a third-party website when you can get it directly from the actual source? And it's not going to cost you money downloading it from Mozy. The same way it's not going to cost you money to download it from the third-party software website. But at least it's secure coming down from Mozy. So they're just the little things I wanted to show you real quick. I'm going to leave the rest of the time open to any questions that you may have. And I'm just going to dive back in here. So I'm just going to get to the questions. And for anybody who is happy enough with what they've seen and they don't, they're not interested in staying around for the questions, thank you very much for taking the time to join us here today. It is very much appreciated. And we hope to see you next month for our next webinar, which should be sent out in the coming weeks. And it will be looking at data retention and how long we hold, how long and how secure, or how long we retain data on the Mozy servers for, and how this benefits you in terms of protecting your data as well. So it's just a continuation of this kind of theme of protecting your data. So I'm just going to open up the questions here now. So, quick question from Bill. When using the Mozy Home Free version of Mozy, are files encrypted both in transit and at rest on Mozy? Yes, indeed, Bill. So, when when the files are being sent in transit to Mozy, they're being sent over a secure SSL connection. So they're being sent over the same way when you log into the banking online and you have this HTTPS connection. It's the same thing for Mozy. We use a HTTPS connection for the files in transit, and then when they're at rest, they have the encryption, the default encryption or the custom encryption that you chose when you were installing the software. Most people were probably used to probably use the default encryption, and that's what it will stay. That was what will stay on the file when it's at rest on the Mozy servers. So when it's in transit, it's going through a secure tunnel. It's going through a secure SSL tunnel, which is, it's like that banking connection that you'd have when you're doing online banking. And at the same time, it also has that default encryption or custom encryption that you chose to put on it when you were installing the software. And as it transfers over and it gets to the servers, it stays at rest using either that default encryption or that custom encryption. So I hope that answers your question, Bill. Let me know if it doesn't. So Rick, your quick question was, what were the last two outline lines? So did you mean in here in the presentation? So just bear with me. So just here in terms of backing up. So what I was saying here, if this is the correct area that you were looking at, Rick, just correct me if I'm wrong. So what I was talking about here is in terms of protecting your data. It can be very useful to maybe check in every couple of weeks just to make sure that you are happy with your file selection and the data that's being selected. So, obviously, we try to use a set and forget method in terms of, you select your files once and you can select the backup set so that any new files in those areas get picked up. But it's no harm just to go back in every couple of weeks or so, take the 10-20 seconds that it may take just to make sure that you are happy and you're comfortable with what files are selected. Okay, and then in terms of the restores, I would, it is worthwhile attempting to run a trial restore at least once so that you're familiar with the experience, so that you'll know that the first time that you get to do a restore is not in any kind of a high stress environment. Okay, perfect. Glad that was the one, Rick. Yeah, so let me just give me in terms of, so Douglas, your quick question was, can you give us a review how to check which files are identified for backup on Mozy? Yeah, so let's just say from a Mac machine first, what I'm going to just do is, as I show you this, I'm just going to power up my VM there. So that's booting while we're looking at this. Open up your settings. So when you have your preferences open, say on a Mac machine, you just go into the files and folders here. Okay, and in here you can see when it's scanning my file selection here. But what you'll see inside here is you'll see different colored gems. So for which files are selected and which files are not. So it'll identify those files that are selected and those ones which are not. In terms of the, I'm just going to power up my Windows machine here as well for those Windows users that are on the session. Okay, so in terms of which files and folders are backed up and which are not, so I have 18 gigabytes of files selected here. And if we go into any of the folders and stuff like that, we'll see if I have something selected, it'll show in the Mac machine, it shows a green gem or shows a yellow gem. Okay. So for some reason it's trying to get me to do my VPN. So it'll show you here to the left of any files that are selected. So you can check, okay, which files were selected. You can also come back to your summary. Okay. And if you go into your history here on a Mac machine, you can select the backup from there. And you can check down along here which files were actually selected for backup in that particular backup. Just going to dive in here and show you on my Windows machine, because most likely a lot of people are on their Windows machine. Apologies this is taking so long, but obviously the joys of using a live environment. So just bear with me here. So on a Windows machine, you can obviously come in and open up your settings. Okay, so you can do that by right clicking down here, going to settings and more settings, and this will open up the settings window for you, Douglas. And from there you can see the files that you've selected in the backup sets, and you can also see the file system tab as well, and those files selected as well and where they're selected from. So it shows in both where the files were selected. Although it shows in both, it's not using up double the amount of storage space. It's just showing you in both. So if you were to deselect a file from here, it would be deselected from here in the file system tab as well. Okay, so you can see it there. You can also, if you want to give a listing of the files that are currently backed up, you can go here, view backed up files, and it will give you a listing here on a Windows machine for all the files that are currently backed up. Okay, and you can do a search for any individual particular files there as well. Okay, so that's how you can go in terms of how to check which files are identified for backup on a Mozy. Just come in and have a look at your backup sets and your file system tab. In terms of backup sets, it's probably a lot easier for you going forward. If you're, say, creating a lot of music files, then it's quite beneficial to select the music backup set, because in there you can, if you look at the rules, it's going to be looking on your C drive for all these different music file types. So that's quite beneficial, because that just means that if one of those music file types is saved onto your C drive, it'll automatically get picked up. So that's the advantages of the backup sets. And there's some pretty good knowledge base articles around file selection on the support.mozy.com webpage. So I hope that answers your question, Douglas. So Ed, you had a good question there. In addition to regular data backups, does it make sense to do an entire system backup of your Windows PC? Yeah, very much so. It is a benefit to you. As I was mentioning a while ago, if it's something like if you get a ransomware malware gets downloaded onto your machine and encrypts your data. If you've done a system backup, it means you can roll back to that previous version of the system, so that the system is healthy again, and then you can download the data off of Mozy servers. So it is a benefit, yes, to do an entire system backup if you wish to. Yeah, it won't be a disadvantage to you in any way. So I hope that answers your question, Ed. Okay, so Peter, your specific question, the servers in which your backup files are stored, can they survive an EMP? to be perfectly honest with you, I've never been asked that question, so I can't say for 100%. I would assume so, but I'm not going to give an official answer, because I don't want to, seem as I can't tell you the 100% truth. So what I will do instead is I'll take note of it, Peter, and I will find out the answer, and I will send it out when I'm sending. I will answer the specific question, when I'm sending out the notes and the link to the recording. Does that sound like a deal? Okay, perfect. Thanks, Peter. Again, sorry I can't answer 100%, but as I say, I've never received that question, so I don't. As I say, I don't want to be telling you lies. I want to be sure that the answer is correct. So, if there are no more questions, again, thank you very much for taking the time to join me here today. I really appreciate it. I know it's an hour out of your day, and everybody's time is important, so I do really appreciate it. I hope what we've been talking about is of some benefit to you. If not everything, then at least maybe one or two small bits of information, maybe of some benefit. And I do look forward to seeing you and having you on our next webinar next month. And as I say, if there are any other questions, I would be leaving it open for another minute or two just to see if there are any questions come through. But if not, then have a great day.